Thank you for joining us. I'm Lee Allentuck from Raising Nerd and the Last Gameboard, and welcome to Mojo Nation's Play Creators Conference and our panel of Tabletop 2.0. Today we're going to talk about innovation and how it impacts, inspires, and enhances game design. So we have three great and talented and experienced panelists with us today, and I'm honored to call them friends. I've worked with them over the years, and I have to say that we have an incredible amount of experience to draw upon and help us sort through innovation and what it means for the game world. So our first panelist, he is an industrial designer and founder of KID Group based in San Francisco, and he's best known for inventing physically interactive games and toys. And his big invention, Bop It, is a throwback to many people's childhood and even currently playing these days. So Dan Klitsner, welcome.
Thank you, Lee.
Our second panelist is a 22-year industry veteran. Rob has worked with worked on over 100 published games, and for a long time, for 14 years, worked at Hasbro Games. Since 2016, he's also been Chief Restoration Officer at Restoration Games, a publisher whose goal is to bring out the best out of print board games back to life. Rob Daviau.
Hey, hello, Rob. Nice to see you.
And then finally, but not what do we say? Not last but not least, definitely, is the co-founder of the Last Gameboard, a physical-digital crossover of board games. Shail is a passionate board gamer with a background in finance and a lot of things, but I think we're going to talk to her about games today more than finance. So we're happy to have Shail Mehta, the CEO and co-founder and inventor of the Last Gameboard. How you doing, Shail?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So we're going to be talking a lot about innovation. We're going to be talking a lot about board games. And I've found as I'm writing all these questions and thinking about this, we're going to probably say innovation 1,000 times because it's really hard to find words that substitute for it. But first, let's talk about your history in the world of game design and gaming and just how you got started. So Dan, tell us how you got started in game design.
Well, I have always loved games. I think I grew up playing them with my family. They were the greatest sort of evenings, experiences, friends, siblings. So to me, it's just something I've always loved. And as I also was interested in inventing things from a young age, more about making things, I guess, making stuff with my hands, went into industrial design. So my brief background is I'm an industrial designer who loves to play games. As evidenced by the things I've created, if you think about it, are pretty much a blend of the two.
Perfect. Hey Rob, how have you gotten started in the game design world? What led you to this career?
Well, like Dan, I played board games growing up. They were pretty standard, but then I ran into Dungeons and Dragons at age 12 back in 1982. Whereas Dan is an industrial designer who works in games. I always consider myself a storyteller who works in games. So I really enjoy trying to evoke a story out of a few pieces of cardboard and maybe some sound or maybe, some writing. Ended up working on some iconic brands at Hasbro for 14 years and then set out on my own to do some different sort of things. So I can't draw and I can sort of write and I understand math. So I ended up in game design.
That's all it took, right?
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's basically, I like to joke that I couldn't stop being a nerd, so I went pro. It's really
perfect.
Yeah, that's how it turned out.
I love that.
Shail, you got an interesting story how you got into games.
Yeah. So I immigrated here when I was 7 from India, and we moved to Manhattan, Kansas. And I don't know if anyone's been to Manhattan, Kansas. There's not a lot going on. But, no one looked like me and no one spoke the language I did. And I just have this memory of like kids sitting down and playing Snakes and Ladders. Shoots and Ladders in the US, Snakes and Ladders in India. But you just sit down, right? And you just started playing and you're kids and, you don't really care that you don't understand each other. You don't know where you're from. You just sat down and you started playing. And I think that's the truth of who we are as people. And I think that's the truth of like humanity, right? To make it into the broader spectrum is that we just want to connect and we want to be a part of something that's bigger than us. And obviously, Lee said, my career went in a completely different direction. You know, I studied poli-sci, I worked for the Nuclear Regulatory Committee, but I've been a gamer this whole time, right? Like, I love games. So from me, I come from the product side, I come from the experience side, and that's why I created Gameboard, was to find a way to bridge the world of physical and digital and find a new way to connect together. And that's the mission that kind of drives me. It drives what we're trying to build with Gameboard. So I come from a non-engineering, non-game designer side, but just from a fan side, and to create a product that brings that experience to life.
Well, I think that's a great point to bring home. I mean, we have three different, and I'm as far away from the designer and engineering side as you can get, and I've been in games for over a decade, so I totally get it. I think it's actually good that we have four different people talking about innovation in games that all come from different backgrounds and different sides. So let's get into it a little bit, right? Let's talk about, as I said, we're going to say innovation like 1,000 times, but
I
you
won't.
know.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. All right, let's play a drinking game. Who can say as many words that aren't innovation but still mean innovation?
I'll lose.
Okay.
It's only, 11 o'clock here. Let's talk about it, though. What does innovation mean to you? You know, because it means a lot of different things. It kind of is a bucket we throw ideas into. From a design side, when you're doing product development, it's like, hey, let's innovate something, right? And you just throw things into it. So, like, you know, Rob, innovation, what does it mean to you when you talk about it from your perspective?
To me, it means I was having this conversation yesterday with friends, and he's like, "Oh, he said he wasn't creative." I said, "You're creative." He goes, "All my stuff is derivative." I said, "All creative stuff is derivative, right? We're telling the same sorts of stories, and we're having very similar experiences. And movies have cadences, and books have structures, and so many times we are having these entertainment ideas or these creative experiences, and they have a structure, and people are playing around within the format of it, right? I mean, even restaurants, you know, you have a first course and a second course and dessert. You don't do it backwards. But innovation is when you take these sort of structures and you do like one or two things very differently, right? Like you kind of think about something and you add something fresh and new to it. And it doesn't have to be reinventing the wheel entirely. And I've seen game submissions that are like that, which is like, everything about this game is brand new, from how you set up to how you win to how you play to what you do on a turn. And I was like, well, there's nothing for people to grab onto. You haven't like innovated. It's really hard. You're right. There is only one word. You haven't innovated. You've just basically given people no guideposts. So innovation to me is this really interesting thing where you do something that feels fresh and new, but around the constraints of what they expect, so they understand it, but it feels entirely different.
No, I think it's a great point. Dan, what you were going to say something? Sorry.
Oh, just that it's all innovation is a cousin or whatever to the other element of timing. You know, timing is things that are innovative at one point are not innovative, you know, several years later or even a month later. So innovation is really related. It isn't just the feature itself or that it's a good idea. It's that it's a good idea at the right time. And it doesn't have to be technology. You know, technology sort of makes people think about innovation. But as Rob said, you know, the way any experience, and obviously even a game experience, you have a deck of cards that's been around for many years, but somebody comes up with just a cool little twist to it. And because you can relate to it, it's innovative. It's a new twist on something that you love, or that you, in the back of your mind, you say, you get it. I see why that innovation makes sense and is a new experience. And I think the biggest word, you know, obviously new is the word for, we can say other than innovate, is that I think an innovation has to be seen as new, and that people inherently need new things in their life. It's actually more like almost like an evolutionary drive that we have. Is we are pulled to whatever's new. We want to see the newest, you know, what's new on when we travel. We want to see what's new, you know, in our everyday life. And I think it's very, very deep primal need to see what is new.
I totally agree with both of you. I mean, it's so brilliant what you said about it being iterative, and it doesn't need to be like leaps and bounds and changes and different. The thing that I would add to that is that connection in innovation with an audience is really important, like how it makes you feel. Like you said, timing, right? Timing is everything. And timing is about, is the time ready, or is society ready? Is the tech ready? Is whatever that little change in innovation ready? And how does that connect with the audience, right? If you're innovating on something, is it resonating properly? Is it the time? Is it the experience that really connects with the audience? And I think that's vital to like making leaps and making jumps in what we're doing with tech or what we're doing with games, is how does that make the audience feel?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. So, I mean, so if I'm listening to you all talk, and it's a wide range, but it could be subtle. It could be, but if you change everything all at once, it's not really innovative. It's sort of like you just changed it. It's something new, and I like the idea around timing. So let's get in. Let's ask the question then. What influences innovation for you all? You're all creators to some extent. Everybody listening here is, coming to this conference are creators, right? So what influences that idea of innovation? Where do you find it? Where do you look for that inspiration? We'll start with Shail. You've come out with a whole new platform. What influenced you to find that platform or develop that?
I think for me, it is that connection. And I know I just said this, but I think it's really important, right? It's that connection and that feeling that you're getting, right? We're creating a new platform and a new way to play games, but the element of what we're doing is still the same, right? It's still the same way that we all love playing board games. The fundamentals of what we're doing is exactly the same. It's just about delivering that one enhanced experience that could change an entire element of gameplay. And that's important because of how we are progressing as society and how we're progressing today and how we've become so tech enabled, and how to preserve the things that we all love so much about games, but just open it up to a wider audience. And for me, like, I think innovation this is going to sound super corny. Innovation is,
we like corny.
For me, it's a lot about where we are today as society, where we are today with what's happening in the world, where we are today with connecting with people, where we've enabled each other to be. And I think that drives a lot of innovation, but it's also this ability to have freedom of imagination, right? For me, it's really important to have a platform that's open, that lets everyone contribute, because I don't know the coolest game that'll be on Gameboard, right? It's for others to decide. It's for other developers to decide. I'm just trying to provide a sandbox and opening it up to different developers to say, here's some cool piece of hardware tech. What do you envision for the future? And it's about collaborative opportunities. And I don't think innovation comes from a single source. I think it comes from all the people around you, and kind of like a movement that's occurring too.
Cool. Dan, where do you find your inspiration for innovation? I mean, you're an industrial designer by trade. How do you find that inspiration as you're developing?
Well, I think, the innovation word, like we were saying, often is associated with tech, and that, sometimes just seeing something, looking through, looking at new things, going to conferences, going to, what's new is sort of a source of innovation, especially if you're a game designer. I think we're all sort of, addicted to, wait, could I make a game out of this? Could I make a game out of that? It's like seeing something new is inspiring if your mind's already thinking of what's something I can do with this. And the importance of there being something new that catches your eye. Originally, toys that had an LED and sound in them were like, oh my God, did you see what they put in that toy? Right? There's an LED in that thing, and it's just because somebody saw an LED somewhere, and said, I wonder if we can make that cheap enough to put on a toy. And the innovation was not just the idea, but the ability to make it, cheap enough to go in a toy. And then the experience of it. So I'm not sure what comes first. If someone who knows nothing just says, I want to make a fire engine toy that makes sound, and then they go on that journey, or if it's that they see the thing that inspires them to do the toy. And I think it obviously comes from both directions. But for me, it's just looking at everyday things that are sort of catch your eye and say, I wonder what I could do with this. That's just a great starter. So I think that's just one way to be inspired by it.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah,
Rob, inspiration, man.
Let me show you a different path. Very rarely do I get a bolt from the blue inspiration. right? And
No
I think a
aha
lot of,
moments. No
yeah,
aha.
I think a lot of creators or people who are new to design, like, I'm waiting for that. I got that blank page. I'm waiting for that bolt from the blue. That is like a brand, and it's hard to plan on those. And it's not like if you just sit at a desk and be like, be creative now, like it comes out. So I find most of innovation doesn't come from the beginning, but it comes from the middle or end of a project. Is you just start working on something that's fine and it's not that innovative and it's exciting. You have an interest in it, and then you get to know it. And if you can step back and ask the questions like, why am I doing this part like this, or why, you just make assumptions about how things always are, either in a game or product or book or whatever you're making. And at some point you can step back and just say, wait, I'm doing this because my brain said everyone does this. This doesn't have to be like this. This can be different. This can be turned on its head. And your inspiration, at least for me, I find often comes in the middle of a project. Once I get my head around it, I can find ways to say, wait, why we just all assumed that this had to be the way it is, and it doesn't, right? I'm working on a game now, and we were like, well, how many characters should we have that are male, and how many should we have are female? And we're talking, and we're doing mix. I'm like, can't they just be animals, right? Like it's just like, it's not the biggest inspiration in the world, but you just go like, instead of like, oftentimes you go A or B, and you're like, well, hold on, why are those the only two choices?
Yeah.
And if you make enough of those moments and those decisions where you sort of say, this could be a little different, this could be better, I'm doing what everyone else does here, the final product can really feel quite different. And maybe that's where you find your aha moment in the middle.
But
And that's a different way to approach it.
yeah, you just it reminded me of the idea of, well, just staying open the whole time. You have to be a receptor, and that invention, itself, I always equate to, basically it's relentless listening. You have to be aggressively listening to what people say, what's the feedback, how it reacts, how you're reacting. It's just a constant open receptor, which is like relentless. And that, I think, is what you're saying about the middle. The middle is that time when you've got your assumptions, you've got something going, and then you're just completely open to making the right decision, but it only comes from listening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I created what Gameboard was like 3 years ago, when I first thought of it, to what it is now, is a completely different product. Because it was like this crazy idea that I was like, we're gonna have like folding screens and all, like it was just this crazy idea. And then to kind of go through the process to do R&D, to like spend 2 years doing prototyping and just going through the whole process, the bulk of it came from when we were actually working through it and working on what the product was. It changed and evolved so much because you're right, it was about the parts in between, the journey throughout, that kind of led to the product and the creation of what it is. And we're still always learning, and we're still always, adding to it and modifying it too. But I think that's the core of innovation too, is to be open and to be like receptive, and not just be so hard on like, this is it. This is the creative thing that'll change the world, right? It's about opening it up and allowing that flexibility to happen too.
And that brings up another point, is that in product development, there's so many different ways to approach it. And I've been a part of it where it's, blue sky, let's just go brainstorm an idea and create something and hope we land on something. The other is you're put in a box and you have these parameters that you've got to design your way out of. What do you guys, in that capacity, how do you feel, which is easier or which is better way to approach it? Maybe it's not better is the question, but which way do you like approaching it? Do you like, sort of wide open spaces, or do you like kind of giving those parameters that challenges you creatively? We'll start with Dan. Go ahead.
Well, I have one mantra that I've milked for years, and that is watch the player, not the game. It's like the start of any of our brainstorms are that just the goal, I think, of animating people, meaning not, obviously Bop It, I learned this from Bop It, which was, it tells you what to do and you do it. And it's more fun for the other people watching, or it's as much fun for them. You're the show when that happens, not the game itself. And so as one, like there's a lot of brainstorm techniques, provocative questions or some object, I think I prefer there to be some, not just a white box, but some sort of goal in mind. And so one goal we use, just animate the person. That just means imagine whatever it is, what are ways to, if I'm playing cards, especially think about, a deck of cards, you're playing poker, there's almost as much interactivity there as an electronic experience, or even more, because the person's picking up the card, they're shuffling, they're dealing, they're looking up, you're passing, you're picking, all these things are things that the people are actually the show, if you think about it. And so as an innovative spark, often I just say, what's a new way to get in some form where the people become the show? And it sort of just stimulates some thinking. It's one technique. Don't know, I'm sure there's a million of them, but that's my one mantra I share with you.
That's cool. I think we've all been playing your games and Bop It and wishing that nobody had a camera around us at the time, we just get so animated. It's so much fun. Rob, how do you look at it from the standpoint? Do you like the wide open spaces, or do you like kind of limiting yourself and trying to think through problems creatively?
Limits are essential, I think. I have never seen a blue sky brainstorm result in a product. Because
why is that? Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, a product, whether it's a game or experience, is going to be bought by someone, owned by someone, used by someone. And if you're like, this can be used by any age or any person at any price point and will be sold anywhere, you're like, there's nothing. You're just grasping at air. Like you need to. There are plenty of design spaces with some guideposts, right? You can have them too restricted, but you say, I'll stick to the industry I know. I mean, but if you're like, oh, we're making a board game that's going to be played by parents and children, and the children are 8 to 10, and it needs to be relatively affordable and something that needs to be in and out in half an hour. I got a million places I can go there, but you have at least given me, because I can always go back. It's a variation on Dan's point, is who is this for? How do they want to use it? Right? So you need a filter to run an idea by, and you go, oh, I have an idea and it involves extensive reading in algebra. First of all, bad game ideas. But even if you had that idea, you go, well, 8-year-olds can't do that. Okay, that's not for this game. It's for something else, right? And you start it basically gives you these metrics to evaluate which ideas are good and which ideas are bad. And if you have none of those metrics, everything is a good idea, right? You're like, sure. And it may lead to interesting directions, and maybe I'm just doing it wrong, but I just find that there are these flights of fancy, and at the end, you're very excited with what you came up with. And then it's almost like the next day you go, what was that? Right? Like you just like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Who are we selling that to? This is for designing for an end product, right? If you just want to make art, design for design's sake, just to have fun, that's a different system. But I've been long conditioned to be a capitalist, I guess, and think at the end, there's going to be people who are going to want to use this. Okay.
Algebra game coming from Rob Daviau soon.
It's actually Algebra 2, but I didn't really want to get in the weeds on that.
So the older audience. I mean, you did say something really interesting there, and Shail, I want to definitely ask you that same question, but follow up to Rob is, do you start with the audience, or is it a chicken and egg? It's like start with an audience to develop the game, or do you have an idea and then you find an audience? How do you generally look at it from that perspective? Or does it just depend?
I'm sorry, was that me?
Yeah, sorry, Rob.
Oh, sorry. For some reason, I thought you said Shail. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of curious.
I've had such shoddy internet over the last 3 days. I assume.
I think that error. I think that I just heard it. It was mine. I'm happy to answer the question, which is, it's usually the first question I go to. Like if I say, I'm going to make a card game, and I just start getting excited and start playing and come up with an idea. I'm like, well, who's this for? Who's playing this? Who do I picture at the table? And sometimes I picture like my mom, who's a casual game player, or a person in my gaming group who works very long hours. And also at the end of the day, her brain can be kind of like, oh, I need something that's more relaxing. Or I might picture friends who get together for a whole Saturday afternoon and play an engaging game. And that may not be the first place I start, but sooner rather than later, as I'm getting excited by an idea, I have to say, like, who is going to be playing this other than me? I need to be excited about it.
Yeah.
But who am I going to take this to play test? And it's just this really nice guidepost, because it just helps me figure out which ideas work for this game and which ideas would work maybe in a different game, but not here.
Mm.
And sometimes I ignore that, and it's always to my detriment. Like, sure, complicated division will work fine in a game. Everyone loves remainders, right? Because it solves the problem in the moment. I know, like, well, that won't stay in, but I just want to stop thinking about this problem and move to a different problem. So I'm just going to put it here as a little placeholder. And you know, and then it'll come out in testing where the bad ideas are, and to Dan's point, where people are excited. And it's almost never where you think it is at the beginning. Like, people are going to love this market and getting cards and buying stuff, and then at the end they're like, they don't care anything about that, and they really like you know, something else that you put in as a throwaway moment.
Cool. Shail, going back to the question, you know, as you developed the last game board, did you look at it as pie in the sky and then kind of cut down, or did you put yourself in a box and say, this is kind of the parameters we've got to play in first? Or how did you approach that?
First, I started with pie in the sky. I think that, you know, before, when it was just like purely imagination and you're just trying to, you know, throw a bunch of things out there and figure out what is actually realistic and what's not, it was important to kind of just iterate in your own mind and then bounce it off of other people and my co-founders, and just like trying to figure out, you know, what's realistic and then dialing it back, I think was really important. But yeah, I'm always like, I'm kind of a type A personality, if you haven't noticed, Lee. But there's certain things that I very much like in the box, especially when it comes to like engineering discussions or like logistics or things. Like I need to have that clear set of parameters. Otherwise, I agree with both of you completely. Like you're not going to get anywhere. But then, yeah, the original creation of Gameboard, it was very pie in the sky. It was very just like, let's see what this is, because we didn't have any, you know, structured goals. I didn't have anything that I was like really, I was creating a product for myself, and I wanted to just see what was possible. So initially with Gameboard, it was very, let's just see what's possible. And then it became like this very, you know, dialed in, precise hardware component product that now relies on a ton of parameters to even exist. So it started big.
Right. Dan, do you start with the audience question, or is it you have an experience in search of an audience, or how do you approach that?
I usually start with myself, because I like playing games. You know, it's kind of, I think with a lot of people, it's hard to imagine, you know, other people. You can kind of imagine, but as Rob said, till you test with them, you don't really know. But you know, I tend to do things that I would love or imagine myself as a kid loving, and like I said, playing with family and all that. I just really, the best, probably in common with many people here, is my favorite thing would be to have a game night, you know. So I'm going to try to think of what would be a way to get everyone interacting, what's a way to so I think more about, I think, an older audience first, probably like kids, you know, 8 to adult. Just games that are much more, you know, really become social and kind of get you talking to each other and connecting. I think I really have just been driven my whole life to kind of recreate, probably going back to that time when you were a kid, and that was the most incredible memory you had, was playing games. There was a certain feeling inside that you got. I think whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or like I said, just a game of cards with your grandparents or something there. Most people have had, when you ask them, what's your warmest, fuzziest moment with family, they will almost always say a game or camping and playing games. I don't know, those two things come up all the time when I ask. So I think I'm just always on the search for that. So it really is about myself in terms of the audience, I guess, or family tends to be. Although, interestingly, you know, my first job was with Discovery Toys, where I designed all sorts of stuff for preschool, infant, babies. But I still think that's still designing it for the adult who buys it for the babies, in terms of you know, what you're designing. So I think I kind of stick to my own, you know, not a very wide group of people. So that's or maybe you just have to continue to think like a 12-year-old my whole life, which has helped.
It's done pretty well for you, so maybe maybe that's the secret to success in this industry.
Lee, just sorry, I know you're asking questions, but just to interject for a second,
Sure.
you talk about innovation or inspiration. I was listening to Dan talk about camping for a second, how that comes up, and that was like my creative brain went, what is it about camping? Are you away? Is it I get wood smoke, like you're in a tent, right? Like, is it the intimacy of having no distractions? Like my brain immediately, like, what is the why do they keep coming back to it? And like, that was like, when you talk about it, like, I could see my brain was like, I was stopped listening for a second because I was off on that creative tangent of what's that feeling that they have from camping that sticks with them.
Yeah.
And how do you make that experience? How do you get an echo of it as an adult? You can never replicate it as an adult, but how do you get that echo or touch upon it? And that's where inspiration comes from sometimes.
Yeah.
It's very much, no, I've been amazed when I ask that question. I write it on a piece of paper, like I've given talks, and I'll say, I'm going to ask this question, and I have those two answers, and I hold them up afterwards, kind of like a magic trick. Like, I knew you were going to say this. And I think it is the concept that people set aside. They take their other agendas away. In camping, it's like a journey. You know, we're kind of related to the COVID situation now, of course, is we can't take as many journeys as we have. And we love taking journeys with people we care about. We like to go explore. We need new stimulus. We like to see new things together and sort of have the shared experience. And we like to then come back and talk about them and have memories of it together. And these become really powerful memories. And I believe that's kind of what a game does, right? You're sharing an experience. You're laughing. You're doing it with people you want to spend time with. And later you have these memories of that time. And it feels like there's something about our agreement to sort of suspend all else. You know, the game means this is just a game. This is just so we can be together. There's really no other purpose often. It's not like, it isn't Algebra 2. It's just saying that I want to spend time with these people. Let's create an experience together, much like travel. So I think it's really interesting that right now, that replacing the adventure of travel is simply having that agreed upon time to set aside all else and just connect together. So it is, but the camping must be the ultimate of that, because people don't say travel, they say camping. Yeah. Like, it's nothing else but just us being here, and that seems to be the powerful, lesson in that.
Yeah, go ahead, Shail. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, I think that's like the one thing that really fundamentally connects all three of us too, is this idea of recreating nostalgia and recreating experiences based on our own experiences and shared experiences. But the key to all that is, like, we have things that we love, that we are so connected to, whether it's through smell, like I love that you said that, like whether it's just through smell or just like feeling that you're close to someone. And I think that's what we all crave, especially in when we sit down to play, is that closeness, is that connectivity. It's to feel like you're sharing something unique, but personal and deeply personal to you, right? And the others around you are part of it. And I think those are the best types of innovation that can exist, is those that really create that spark of feeling together.
Yeah. Well, and since you guys brought it up, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the new era of...
I didn't bring it up. I think that was Dan.
Dan brought it up. But
every conversation I have had for the past 6 months, it has come up every business meeting, every personal meeting. How can you not?
I know.
But it's making impact on so many things, and at times it's heartbreaking that I see it in my own kids and their friends that they can't gather and connect. We can't see our family. I was on a call this morning where a guy said you can go to a pub, but you can't go see your family. So it's having long-standing effects, and for games, a lot of it is about face-to-face. It's about that connection. It's about shared experiences. And there are ways of doing it remotely, or having a game or a contest of some sort without that face-to-face. But how has that changed the way you think about innovation and developing new experiences and things like that? And what do you think is going to be the long-term effects on our industry when it comes to, maybe we go back to the way it was, or it's a whole new era, here forth. So, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Shail, you have an entire product that's based on the ability of either playing face-to-face or remotely. How do you see this playing out?
I think I think that just from the gaming community, I think that everyone has seen such a deep drive from, whether it's through revenue, through interest, just players trying to connect and play together. I mean, how much can you honestly Netflix and binge, right? Like there's a limit. You want to be able to do more things. You want to connect even when you can't connect. And I think that gaming is one of the outlets that people are really turning to right now to try to feel like you're still a part of something. And that's kind of core for us personally. Gameboard, that is what it's about, right? Being able to play with someone even when they're not in the same room as you, but not being completely virtual, right? Like you're only interacting in a virtual world with virtual people, with virtual avatars. That could also have a level of fatigue. And there's so many studies that say that makes you feel more alone. There's more isolation trends when you are completely virtual, even though you're engaging with a virtual community, right? And a lot of gamers, especially video gamers, they feel, depression, ADHD. There's a lot of isolation trends that occur when you are purely virtual. And this need for physical, tactile connection is more important and more prevalent now than ever, right? So merging these two worlds, for us, the future is connectivity and the bridge between the physical and digital. How do you create analog and physical experience with just a touch of technology to bring you together? So when there are times of COVID, when there are times of separation, and we live in a global society, right? People travel and move to all parts of the world. How do you still stay connected and still be a part of a community that you grew up with or that you've curated and that you want to continue to be a part of? So for us, that's vital, right? That's what Gameboard is about. It's about bringing people together even when you can't be together. So I think for me, I've seen the value of, I wish Gameboard was already out, to be honest. Like, I wish it was out and, people could be playing on it now. And we're still like months out from it being even into the hands of a customer. But I hope that people are seeing now the value of merging technology with analog, but then also understanding the need to feel connected. We're not a replacement technology. We're just trying to enhance it. And we're just trying to bring a new element of play and a new element of connectivity. And that's what we hope to accomplish with Gameboard.
Yeah, thank you. It's I wish it was out too. It'd be great to play you guys in a game right now virtually and doing that. Dan, how has this changed the way you develop or think about innovating experiences for people in this new era, this new world? Has it changed you?
I've come in, I think the most obvious thing is trying to come up, just as we talked about earlier, this is now something new usually, especially this big of a trend, gets you thinking that, what's new now that wasn't new before? What's innovative now because of the timing? And I think clearly there's all sorts of ideas of how to connect people, as Shail said, still with a little different rules. And so I think it'll be around for a while, and probably something really great will come out of it as far as gameplay that was stimulated by the idea of being more separated, or just because it's more trendy, or something with your mask, or who knows, but I'm sure something will come out that will last from it that we didn't have before. I think just in going back to what Shail was saying about the last Gameboard, that this idea of a horizontal surface that you play on, I think is really something not to overlook when you talk about digital. Because although people play on screens, when you stare like we're doing straight across and have to interact with this thing, it's very different than, one of the powerful things, go back to the camping analogy, you're sitting around a campfire. There's something about that idea that connects people because they're all in a circle with something shared in the middle. It's really a very, very deep difference between that and playing games that are over on a vertical screen. It's just different. So the idea of recreating that and having the ability to experience that together, whether it's digitally with a horizontal screen, for instance, or just how that's going to translate, I find those two things that are sort of muddling around in there that are going to come out of this.
Cool.
And to cast a wider net, I mean,
Sure.
if all goes relatively well, by any idea I would come up with now for quarantine and COVID, by the time it came out, the world will have changed enough that it's not relevant. So in some ways, my day-to-day life hasn't changed because I in my industry can't react quickly enough to account for today's world because of manufacturing things. But when you look at trends, you know, in 1918, we had a flu pandemic and we had the end of World War I, and then we had the Roaring '20s. And though there were many factors that led to it, I was talking about this with my kids the other day, and they were arguing that the Roaring '20s was in some way a reaction to people who had to stay home, who were quarantined, who had seen many horrific things, wanting to say life is short. So looking forward to the rest of this decade, how are people going to react? You can say on the one hand, no one's going to want to be at home around a board game because they've been at home the whole time. On the other hand, they can have other people into their home, and maybe they want to do it more because they're not isolated through screens. So I'm not a futurist. I can't predict, you know, what's going to happen other than there'll be a cultural shift. I also think of kids right now in school learning through Zoom may never want a video conference when they're 30 because it reminds them of being a kid and stuck at home during a pandemic. And it might be the type of thing that people flock back to offices because they can't stand the memories of being home when they were a kid. Like it's a anti-camping memory. So things will be very different in 10 years in a way that we'll only be able to judge 10 years from now, but it will be different.
So, I mean, that brings up another question that I had about our industry in general. It's a slow moving industry, right? It's not, you don't see things move fast in this industry. It just doesn't happen. I remember when I first got in here, remembering developing a game with a team and it was like, it'll be out in 2 years. And I'm like, what? That's insane. You know, I think they've shortened that span a bit. Is our industry, you know, it's been around since the caveman days, right? When they were playing with dice and back in ancient Egypt, when they used different games to tell, you know, your fortune and your future. You know, does our game industry move too slow for innovation? Is it you know, a place that fosters innovation and technology being infused into it? What do you guys think about that? Do you?
Well, if dice are invented by the caveman, then I don't think it's pretty slow moving would be the answer.
Well, or they got it right on the first try.
Yeah, nailed it. Ship it.
I actually think a big part of the slowness of the toy and game industry is not the innovation at the front. I mean, it takes time to do a game right or a toy right, but that certainly could be much faster. The issue is that it's considered to be a leisure purchase that most people aren't going to spend a lot of money for. And that affects the entire manufacturing and distribution pipeline. You know, I could make a game domestically, which would be more expensive than some factories that are further away, or I could fly stuff in, but the price point would be such that most people wouldn't buy it. So when you're faced with having to source things, then put them on a boat and then put them on trains and then get them into stores, that adds like 9 months of the process just through the manufacturing and distribution, which is largely based on, and I understand people are like, I'm not going to pay $100 for a game. That would be $25 if you made it come out 9 months later. And that is the big area which slows it down. And maybe innovation, we all talk about creativity and designing things and sort of the creative front. If there was innovation in the manufacturing and distribution and pipeline of games at the back end, I think you'd see a lot of good ideas be able to come out faster.
Yeah. I'll piggyback off of that. I think another stalemate in innovation, and we, you know, as cultural preferences are changing, we are this, you know, we're the culture of instant gratification, right? That's also really true. And I think that's why board games have stayed in like a leisure category where media, video games, you know, movies have become such rapid turnaround, like especially with like streaming services and stuff too. But I think a lot of that is because lack of data, right? I talk to so many developers all the time, and they waste money on predicting what people will like or what audiences will resonate to, and the games don't work, right? And they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and the games don't work. And this is true for indie publishers, this is true for large publishers, and it's because you don't know what the audience is going to like at that moment. Are you connecting accurately with the time and with the, you know, the timing, like we were talking about, is everything. Are you connecting in the right way? And that's because people just don't know. it's a physical product that you put out once, and you have no way of getting any metrics or value add or data back about how often are people playing. Are they liking it? Do they shelve it once? Should you iterate on it? There's very limited data. So I think that really providing that sort of back-end information to creators is important about like what genres are working and what people are really playing to and what our preference is really going to. If we can provide accurate trend analysis and accurate predictors of this is what we've always talked about, this Netflix does, like, oh, ninjas are working and pirates are working, let's make a ninja pirate movie, and it does well, right? It's about, because Netflix knows what people are doing and what they're watching and what they're leaning towards, so they can really use their money efficiently. And that's what I think another hurdle is too, is how do you use some back-end information to propel people to churn out content that's different and perhaps a little faster. I think the pace.
Is our industry too risk averse for innovation?
I mean, when you got a 2-year development cycle, it's hard not to be risk averse.
Some people are and some people aren't. You know, I think some people are very open to new tech and trying new things, and then I think there's some that are just like, hell no, I don't want to go there. I don't understand this. And I'm speaking from personal experience, right? So it's like some people are extremely interested in, oh, I've thought about this. Let's, you know, and they're already thinking about like how to preserve their revenue and how to modify and how to work with the times. And then there's people who just don't want anything to do with it because they don't understand it. It's not proven out yet. So I think it's a balance of both, and you can't blame either side, right? Because it's just a matter of learning, and it's new, and you've spent your life creating something, and you're just going to take a risk and gamble it on something. I kind of get both sides.
Yeah, there was a model that when I first started and was doing electronic-y kind of games, was Tiger Electronics had a philosophy where they would just throw stuff at the wall and it
isn't a kids program, Dan. You can say whatever you want.
All right, they threw shit at the wall and whatever stuck, and so they would keep, and they would do it fast. You know, somehow they were just cranking things. Unfortunately, half the games weren't, you know, quite worked out, or the code was bad, but they just said, we're just going to do everything fully on the founders' hunches. They just did whatever they liked and did it quickly. And, you know, it created a lot of carnage. A lot of things just didn't ever fly. But of course, out of that, Furby was created, probably because they just, you know, they got 1 out of 500 right, or whatever it was that took off big. And that was the whole goal. They had quite a few other little innovations, but, you know, it was because they would spend less money, do it quick. They had a different model. I don't really like it because I'd rather go with more, you know, more thoughtful creation, because I think in general, wasting all those resources and plastics and this, you know, it's just a lot of waste, which I think is a bummer about the toy industry in general, if you design things to do that. So yeah. In terms of fast turnarounds, you know, I think it is the whole process itself. It's just a matter of you can choose to do it that way. I just don't know that if it's that, as Rob said, it's a 2-year cycle. There's some good things about that. So hopefully you make good decisions.
So the question I have from that is, and it's a perfect segue into this, is, you know, what are those pitfalls of innovation? What do you know, if you could give advice to people that are listening or watching that are new to this industry, or even veterans, you know, what are some of those pitfalls that you want to avoid, or questions you should ask early in the process or throughout the process? Rob, we'll throw it to you. As you know, tell us about some of the pitfalls you've seen or you want people to avoid.
Well, I think a good question to ask when you start doing something radical, as I will say this sometimes in team meetings, is, are we solving a problem that no one has? Or do we have a solution in search of a problem? Right?
Yeah.
You know, bad innovation would be like, it's a board game, and then halfway through playing it catches on fire. You're like, that is innovative. That no one has done that. And you're like, for a reason. Right. And so like sometimes like you get excited because of the newness of the idea, and just, as Dan said, test, see how people react. See, you know, just make sure that people are excited, even if it scares some people.
Yeah.
You know, we're wrapping up our time, and we could have spent the whole hour on how people feel about tech in games, because it's very different when you talk about Bop It versus the last Gameboard versus a game we're doing, Return to Dark Tower. One is like a digital game board, one is an electronic product, and our game has a phone app that talks to a thing in the middle. And people get very opinionated about it. Some people hate it. Some people are fine with it. Some people see it as the future. You just want to make sure that, in my mind, you just ask enough people so that you don't find that 99% of people go, I have no interest in that.
Yeah. Good stuff. Shail, what is your thought on pitfalls?
I totally agree. I think that putting it out to the audience is key, right? You can have what you think is the most fantastic idea in your head, but until you put it out to the audience and you start understanding what an audience wants, you're never going to get that right? One of the things that I would suggest, like even before I had a prototype, and this is free, right? Like you can I used to show up to conventions and just walk around talking to people. Hey, what do you think is the future of board games? I have some wine in that room if you want to come talk to me. Like just, bribing people to just talk to you. And I got hundreds and hundreds of people to just talk to me about what they see as the future of games and what they see as the future of play. And it's about putting it out there, no matter how fresh or how new the idea is. That's when you're truly going to find something that resonates with an audience, is if you listen to them.
Dan?
Yeah, the pitfalls, I think we've covered most of them, is listening to just yourself instead of everyone else is almost always, it sometimes works. And unfortunately, sometimes if you're right one time, it's kind of like you think you know everything, but it is about follow a hunch, ask people, don't fall in the pitfall of trying to think you have all the answers, and just, keep in mind that the innovation, having something that has electronics in it. I mean, one of the stories of, again, Bop It was a 6-second sound chip. And luckily it was only 6 seconds. So the game, it was like, hey, somehow it came up doing something with this very limited capacity, made the game, because it allowed for, if it went on if it had 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, who knows what would have been in there, and it was the idea. Actually, the reason it has the pass it, there was a half second left. There was only 5.5 seconds used. And someone said, what should we do with that other half second? And, I would think I wanted to put a special sound or this, whatever. And someone said, pass it. It's a half a second of sound. It changed the entire game just by listening to someone, because they, and I think it's listening and knowing it when you hear it is really important. Maybe a good inventor is someone who really, listens well and then has a decision making to pick the winners when they hear them. And so I think that's it. The pitfall is usually don't be in a vacuum, and don't let technology, be the thing that's there just for itself. You can push people away with technology very easily by the fact that everything that pulls time from them. If they're the show, as I like to say, if they're all staring at something or looking at something and they're not making each other animated, they're not the show, then it usually just doesn't feel good. So I think you're right in that's a pitfall of technology in general. I think you have to be very careful.
Right. I think that's a huge point. Too many times I've seen people put technology in for the sake of technology, and that becomes the reason for it existing versus that experience. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't last, right? It's people get bored of it, or it's just not that, maybe it was cute at the beginning, but they generally don't last. From a fad or from a trends perspective, probably a better way to say it, like, what are you most excited about as far as trends, things that are coming out? It doesn't have to be electronic. It doesn't have to be technology. It could be anything, but trends in the way of innovation, whether it's in games or experiences outside of games. Is there anything out there you've seen that you're kind of like, oh, that could be cool? How do we lean in on those kind of things? Dan, we'll start with you.
Well, I love this anti-gravity thing that's happening now. I just think that's going to be great.
I'm like, okay, things are different on the West Coast.
Have I not been up on that? I check CNN every day. I haven't seen that.
I know I've been in my house a lot.
You mean with this crowd, you actually took that semi-seriously? Yeah, I don't know.
Everything has been so serious, and then it's suddenly anti-gravity. It's cool, man.
Cool.
Get some.
Yeah, really, yeah.
I'm like, is he talking about hoverboards? Like, I was trying to really figure out what you're going.
No, I don't know. I just like when people ask what's the next big thing. I don't know. It's always anti-gravity. But I think that where things are going. It's just I actually come up kind of blank on it because, like you said, especially in the context we are now, I'm not really predicting it. I think it's something about feeling the sway of things as they happen. So I think I'm still watching a little bit of what's going on. It is a sense that there's I think a reaction. I'm thinking more, as Rob said, about 2 years from now, the reaction of what's going to happen. I think a lot of group experiences are going to be more popular, whether they're in the home or outdoors together. I can imagine concerts and group get-togethers, I think, are going to have a big resurgence. So maybe thinking more about games in that way is how to create that rebound.
Cool.
With anti-gravity.
And anti-gravity.
I like anti-gravity.
Yeah. Personally, I'm very excited about an innovation in vaccine research. That is top of my list. Everything else is a very distant second right now.
And mask development.
Yeah, anything. I'm a big food guy. I miss restaurants. That was like my hobby. It's going out and having
I
other
miss restaurants too.
Cooking. I'm very curious. I have no answers. I have no predictions, but I'm very curious how restaurants are going to look 3 to 5 years from now, where they just snap back, but there'll be fewer. Like they'll be different. Like the way people get together because you can't wear a mask and you're sharing and you're very close and you're talking. That's human nature. That's the campfire. That's being part of a tribe and part of a family. They're going to be different. They're going to be different in some way. We're going to see something cool and we're going to miss certain parts, but I'm very curious to see, because those are another experience. You go out and there's certain rituals you do, and then you've been to a restaurant and they will be slightly different.
Yeah. Shail, how about you? What are any trends you're looking at?
I kind of completely agree with both of them. I think that it's so unpredictable. I think I can only speak for myself and what I'm looking forward to after COVID, and that is this. It is going out again. I hate cooking. I hate cooking at home. I hate people who can share great Instagrams of cooking. Like I want to go to a restaurant, right? So I miss that, and I want to be a part of that, and I want to go back to concerts. And I'm very I miss that. So I can't speak for the trend of society, but from my own perspective, I do see me engaging more and doing more and traveling more and all the things that I couldn't do this year and all the things that I felt like I took advantage of, to double down on it a little bit more. So that's where I see the world going.
We'll those pesky kids expect food every night. It's insane.
Every night, my child wants dinner. I'm like, what is happening?
We never signed up for this.
I love cooking. It's like my main hobby. I'm so tired of it.
There's only so many ways to cook pasta,
I'm like, Uber Eats, you're hungry? Great, here you go.
Yeah. So I kind of close it out with 2 more questions, and one of them is just really about that next generation. We talk about kids and stuff, and you guys, each entered the business in different ways. How do we keep this going? How do we get that next generation excited about games and not just playing games, but coming into as designers or developers and bringing new innovations, new ideas in? Dan, I know you're very active with the Young Inventors Challenge. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this and the fact of how do we inspire that next generation of game or toy designers?
Yeah, that's pretty directly related to, the mission of that, which we do at ShyTag every year, is to just inspire creative thinking in kids, playful creative thinking, pretty broad, in terms of, but it's also to connect them to the rest of the toy industry, the resources of our industry as mentors. So it's as most mentoring, if you've ever mentored, you'll find that usually the person mentoring learns more than the person they're mentoring. It just, you get a lot out of it. And I know in inspiring, what the good thing about things like that is the way we inspire the next generation is, try to mentor them, get them involved in that particular event. You can be a judge, mentor of kids' ideas, and you'll be blown away by their thinking. It's just kids naturally think. We like the way we thought. We forget how you'll be blown away by the amount of creativity that just comes out of them if given the right platform. So part of it is events like that where you're giving them motivation to connect with mentors that are really legitimate and really, as we have in our industry. So that's a small way you could help that I could suggest.
Great. Shail. Sorry, Rob. Shail, go ahead.
I agree. I think it's about access. I think kids are extremely imaginative, and they see the world in a completely different way. And I'm learning that from a 3-year-old. So I think it's important to just give them access. I think that when you give people access to things like building games, to have mentorship, to have opportunities to create games, like they'll take it and run with it. So as to be as inclusive as possible and understand that it's important to help foster imagination and innovation in a younger generation is really important.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I often say, like, about teaching games and things like that, is that all of us started as game designers. You just see a kid and they come up with rules to everything, play patterns and rules. And you stand over here and you're the bad guy. And this is the red brick is really a shoe. And it makes no sense to adults, but they are making a game. And then, maybe the educational system changes coming out of this, where it's less regimented in test-based learning and curriculum. And I know nothing about education. I love teachers. So I just think at the end you start out as like these creative game, designery toy people, and naturally when you get older you change, but you end up at 18 like, ready for work, not ready for play.
Yeah.
So that brings up my last question. That was perfect, Rob, because it goes right into this.
You're welcome.
We all grow older and more mature, except for maybe Dan, who just mentioned it earlier, that he's still got that mind of the 12-year-old, I think you said. 12? What is your guilty pleasure that helps you stay young and creative? Like, what do you do activity-wise that, like, forces you to kind of either get out of a comfort zone or go throw back to nostalgia that gets you, and I'll give my example is that I try to teach myself new things, and that drum set behind me, where it is played quite a bit, it's not played very well at all, has been sort of my guilty pleasure to stay creative and finding new things. What do you guys do, and what advice do you have for other people that are watching? What would you do to, like, what do you do to stay creative? So Rob, I'll start with you since you brought it up. I'll let you kind of close that out.
Sometimes I revisit old favorites. I'm in the process of cataloging my old comic book collection, which I haven't added to in 20 years to sell most of it, but I sometimes like, oh no, I'm reading that one again. I'm reading that one again. So I'm just revisiting things that gave me, like, I find a comic that I read at 7. I'm like, I remember this panel. So it's just kind of fun to put me back in the brain space of a kid. But for something new, I play a lot of games that are either digital games or role-playing games to feel like a kid, because I don't work in those industries. If I play a board game, I enjoy it, but I'm like, who's the artist? Who's the publisher? Right? and like, I can't shut off the fact that that's what I do for a living. So if I want to just play, I tend to play some sort of game that is nothing that I would ever think of making or doing and have no interest. And I've been very careful about that. Every time I think like, oh, I should make a digital game, like, nope, that can just remain fun. And just remembering that, like, that's what people do. At the end of the day, they're tired. They want to have fun. So how do I basically have fun and then remember what that feels like?
Great. Dan, what is your guilty pleasure?
I think I have too many of them is my problem. I've been, music. I've always been in bands, and I draw, and I kind of like dabbling with a lot of things, and kind of never have enough time to do all of them, to be honest. And I feel like for other people, maybe the advice I try to give myself is actually draw one thing a day. Doodle, whatever it is. If you're asking what's a way to sort of, a guilty pleasure is different than I thought the question was more about what do you do to stay creative.
Well, that's fine too. Yeah.
Guilty pleasure. Yeah. But if you say, what is it? I think I've always tried to follow this, do a doodle a day of something. And even if you don't draw, especially if you don't draw, do something that whatever, no judgment, just doodle something. It's amazing what can pop out of that.
Excellent. Shail?
Yeah. So I have a lot. I went with Dan on this, but I think that I've been trying to play games like with my daughter, and she's just like what Rob was saying. She comes up with her own rules because she's 3, and she's just like, no, this is the shoe now, and this is a mermaid, and you're just like looking at a blocks, and the mermaid is gonna fly, and she just like comes up with her own imagination of like what the game is, and
So
I love doing that.
She's basically cheating to win.
She's cheating, and that was me as a kid, so I'm like all about it. And then another thing I do is like I have like a whole set. I am obsessed with just like, I love reading older books, so I always reread like the Harry Potter series every other summer. It's just like I read it when I was 11, and it's just like something that's stuck with me forever, and it like keeps me connected about like imagination and like opening up, and so I love it. No shame.
Cool. Nice. No shame.
No shame.
So that's it. I want to thank you guys, Rob, Dan, Shail. You guys have been fantastic. I especially want to thank Billy Langsworthy and the team at Mojo Nation for putting this on and giving us the opportunity to, share our thoughts and really, honestly, supporting our industry. I think they've been fantastic. And for now, just stay safe and, keep playing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye.